She was just a tired single mom, scrubbing boardroom floors when the suits walked in. A junior executive mocked her, told her to get out. But when the client spoke French, she answered back in flawless words that stopped the room cold. In one shocking moment, the CEO made her a vice president on the spot. It should have been a dream come true. But the higher she rose, the more enemies circled. Secrets from her past were dragged into the light, and powerful men were determined to tear her down. Now, she must fight not just for her job, but for her dignity, her family, and the truth. Will a woman who once mopped their floors prove she belongs at the very top, or will the world break her before she gets the chance? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as Evie Martin pushed through the heavy glass doors of the downtown St. Louis skyscraper. The night air still clung to her shoulders, warm and sticky even at this late hour. Her sensible shoes squeaked against the polished marble floor as she made her way to the security desk, lunch pail swinging gently at her side. "Evening, Miss Evie," called out Jerome, the night guard. His familiar smile warmed the sterile lobby. "Got your chicken salad sandwich tonight?" "Tuna today," she replied with a gentle laugh. "Trying to be healthy, you know how it is." The elevator doors whispered open, and Carmen Alvarez stepped out, clipboard in hand. Her supervisor's dark curls were pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, but her eyes sparkled with their usual warmth. "Right on time as always, Evie," Carmen said, checking her watch. "You've got the executive floor tonight. Board meeting first thing tomorrow." Evie nodded, already reaching for her cleaning cart. "I'll make sure it sparkles. Just." Carmen hesitated, her expression softening. "Don't stay too late up there, okay? Those suit types have their morning meeting at 8 sharp. We don't want any awkward encounters." "Don't worry about me," Evie assured her, wheeling the cart toward the elevator. "I know my place." As the elevator climbed, Evie began humming softly. Amazing Grace, the same hymn she'd sung in church just yesterday. The familiar melody settled her nerves, as it always did. 38 floors up, the doors opened to darkness, broken only by the city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. The executive floor always felt different at night, peaceful, almost holy in its silence. During the day, it bustled with important people making important decisions. But now, it belonged to her and her quiet work. Evie's fingers traced the wall until she found the light switch. The boardroom illuminated gradually, revealing the massive mahogany table that dominated the space. She loved this room best, with its leather chairs and spectacular view of the arch glowing silver in the distance. "Time to make you shine," she murmured to the table, pulling out her supplies. As she worked, her mind wandered to Maya, probably just starting her night shift at the hospital. Her daughter had inherited her work ethic, that was certain. Sometimes Evie wondered if she'd inherited too much of it, the need to carry everyone's burdens, to push through exhaustion with a smile. The soft cloth moved in practice circles across the wood, and Evie's humming grew a little louder. The hymn reminded her of Jonah's latest kindest points chart, decorated with wobbly stars and stuck proudly to their refrigerator. "Nana gets 5 points, he declared yesterday, for making Mrs. Johnson soup when she was sick." Something glinted in the light, catching her eye. Evie leaned closer, discovering a silver cufflink lodged in the slight gap between 2 table sections. With careful fingers, she extracted it, turning the piece over to reveal an elegant engraved D. "Must be Mr. Delaney's," she mused, thinking of the board chairman's son. Chase Delaney always wore French cuffs, even in the middle of a St. Louis summer. She tucked the cufflink into her uniform pocket, making a mental note to return it discreetly. The work continued, methodical and soothing. Evie moved from the table to the windows, then to the credenza where the executives kept their coffee supplies. Her reflection ghosted in the glass. Silver hair, neat despite the humidity, uniform pressed and proper. She'd stopped dyeing her hair years ago after Ben passed. These days, she wore her age like a badge of quiet dignity. "Lord," she whispered, her cloth moving in slow circles on the window, "give me strength for whatever comes. Watch over Maya during her shift. Help Jonah with his spelling test tomorrow." She paused, adding with a small smile, "And maybe help me find a way to convince that grandson of mine that vegetables won't kill him." The city spread out below her, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there, Maya was checking on patients, probably tucking her own exhaustion behind a professional smile. Evie's heart swelled with pride. Her daughter had worked so hard for her nursing degree, even when it meant long years of Evie taking night shifts to help with tuition and childcare. Time slipped by as Evie worked her way around the room. Every surface gleamed, every chair was perfectly aligned. The sky outside began to lighten, almost imperceptibly, painting the eastern horizon in the faintest wash of pearl. She stepped back, surveying the boardroom with satisfaction. The table reflected the first hint of dawn like still water, and the brass fixtures shone warm and welcoming. Even the air smelled fresh, lemon polish and morning. "Beautiful," she murmured, allowing herself a moment to admire how the strengthening light played across the pristine surfaces. Soon, the room would fill with voices and activity, decisions and deals. But for now, in this peaceful in-between time, it was perfect. The cufflink pressed against her hip through her pocket, reminding her of its presence. She'd have to find a way to return it without drawing attention to herself. That was the key to this job, being invisible while making everything visible, making things shine without being seen. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor boardroom, casting long shadows across the polished table. Evie Martin worked quickly, wiping down the last watermarks from coffee rings left by an early morning meeting. The lemony scent of cleaning solution filled the air as she moved methodically around the massive oak table. She heard them before she saw them, the click of expensive shoes on marble, the low murmur of voices growing louder. Executives were arriving early for the big international client meeting. Evie gathered her cleaning supplies, trying to make herself invisible as they filed in. 3 men in crisp suits entered first, followed by 2 women in sharp blazers. They barely glanced at her as they claimed their seats, spreading papers and opening laptops. Evie kept her head down, focusing on collecting her spray bottles and rags. "Oh, look, the help is still here." The mocking voice cut through the quiet room. Chase Delaney stood in the doorway, his perfectly tailored suit matching his perfectly styled hair. At 29, he was the youngest executive in the room, and he carried himself with the entitled confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. Evie's cheeks burned as she quickened her movements, but Chase wasn't finished.
"You know, some people are meant to mop, not talk. Isn't that right?"
He smirked at his colleagues, seeking approval. A few shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one spoke up. "I'm just finishing up," Evie said softly, her voice steady despite the humiliation coursing through her. She'd dealt with people like Chase before. Their cruelty usually masked deeper insecurities. Still, his words stung. The clicking of heels in the hallway announced another arrival. A tall, elegant woman appeared in the doorway. Her silver-streaked dark hair swept back in a classic French twist. Renée Dubois, the French client everyone had been preparing for all week. Evie recognized her from the company newsletters. "Bonjour," Renée said, hesitating slightly. "I apologize, but I was told there would be an interpreter." Chase stepped forward, his smile bright but empty. "Yes, she's running a bit late. Traffic, you know how it is." He gestured dismissively at Evie. "You can go now, cleaning lady. We have important business to discuss." Renée's expression flickered as she attempted to respond in English. "I would prefer, that is. My English is not so." She paused, clearly frustrated by the language barrier. "Really, you need to leave," Chase said to Evie, his tone sharp. "This is a private meeting, not a cleaning crew social hour." Evie clutched her cleaning caddy tighter, her knuckles white against the plastic handle. She saw Renée's discomfort, saw Chase's smirk deepen as he basked in his perceived superiority. The room felt charged with tension as everyone waited for her to scurry away. Instead, she set down her cleaning supplies and took a deep breath. Years of early morning prayers and late-night hymns had taught her that dignity wasn't something others could take away. It was a gift from God. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. The tension in the boardroom hung thick as morning fog. Renée Dubois stood uncertainly by the leather chairs, her elegant posture betraying her discomfort at the language barrier. The executives shifted awkwardly in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Evie took a deep breath, straightened her navy cleaning uniform, and spoke in perfect French. "Madame Dubois, please allow me to welcome you to St. Louis. Would you prefer to conduct our conversation in French until the interpreter arrives?" The words flowed from her lips with the gentle accent of the Loire Valley, each syllable crisp and clear. The reaction around the table was immediate. sharp intakes of breath, widening eyes, and dropped jaws. Chase Delaney's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Renee's face transformed with relief and delight. "Mais oui, what a pleasure to hear my mother tongue spoken so beautifully," she responded in French, her shoulders relaxing. "Where did you learn to speak with such authenticity?" "I spent several years studying in Tours," Evie replied warmly, maintaining the French conversation. "The Loire Valley became my second home. I later taught French at our community college." Renee's eyes sparkled with interest. "Tours! I know it well. My aunt still lives near the cathedral. What a wonderful coincidence!" The two women shared a genuine laugh, the kind that bridges cultures and dissolves pretense. The other executives watched this exchange like spectators at a tennis match, heads swiveling back and forth. "Please sit," Evie gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "Would you like some water? Coffee, perhaps?" Her French remained impeccable, but her manner was humble and genuine. "Water would be lovely, thank you," Renee replied, settling into her seat with newfound ease. "Tell me, do you know the little cafe near the cathedral square? The one with the blue awning? Le Petit Coin?" "Of course. Their pain au chocolat was my weakness every morning," Evie answered, pouring water from the crystal pitcher. The two women shared another laugh, this one warmer than the first. Chase Delaney's face had turned an interesting shade of red. He tugged at his collar, clearly remembering his earlier snide remarks about people who mop, not talk. Other executives around the table wore expressions ranging from embarrassment to amazement. The conversation flowed naturally as Renee began discussing the market challenges her company faced in the Midwest. Evie listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated not just language fluency but business acumen. "The cultural differences, they create obstacles," Renee explained, gesturing expressively. "We need someone who truly understands both sides." "Perhaps," Evie suggested gently, "it's less about bridging differences and more about finding common ground. Every parent wants the best for their children, whether they're in Paris or St. Louis." Renee's eyes lit up. "Exactement. This is precisely what I've been trying to express in our previous meetings." The boardroom door opened, and a flustered woman in a blazer rushed in clutching a portfolio. "I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm Sarah Chen, the interpreter for today's meeting." Renee waved her hand dismissively, not breaking from her animated conversation with Evie. None, we won't be needing translation services today. Madame Martin understands perfectly, and her French is magnifique." The interpreter stood awkwardly for a moment, before gathering her things and quietly excusing herself. Chase seemed to sink lower in his chair, his earlier arrogance deflated like a day-old balloon. The meeting began in earnest, with Evie seamlessly translating complex market data and strategic proposals. Her voice carried the melody of French pronunciation while maintaining the precision needed for business terminology. The atmosphere in the room had transformed from tense to productive, with Renee actively engaged and the other executives following along through Evie's clear translations. Neither Evie nor the others noticed when Graham Whitfield, the CEO, slipped quietly into the room. He took a seat in the corner, his presence barely registering as he observed the scene before him. His eyes followed Evie as she moved between French and English, handling million-dollar negotiations with the same grace she'd shown while polishing the table an hour earlier. The morning light continued to brighten the room as Evie's voice flowed like music, building bridges between cultures with each carefully chosen word. Renee was leaning forward now, fully engaged in the discussion, her earlier discomfort completely forgotten. The other executives had begun taking notes, their initial shock replaced by respectful attention. In her navy uniform, Evie stood out against the backdrop of suits and silk blouses, but her dignity and composure made the distinction seem meaningless. She wasn't just translating words, she was connecting worlds, her gentle authority drawing everyone into a shared understanding. Graham Whitfield leaned back in his corner chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face as he watched this unexpected scene unfold in his boardroom. His fingers were steepled under his chin, his eyes never leaving the woman in the cleaning uniform who had just transformed a potential business disaster into something approaching magic. The final handshakes and warm farewells marked the end of what had become an unexpectedly successful meeting. Renee Dubois beamed as she gathered her designer briefcase, pausing to squeeze Evie's hand with genuine warmth. Merci beaucoup, Madame Martin. You have made this morning très spécial. Evie smiled softly, already reaching for her cleaning cart. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching dust motes in its golden rays. She wanted nothing more than to fade back into her routine, to return to the quiet comfort of her familiar tasks. Her hands trembled slightly as she began collecting the empty water glasses from the polished conference table. Mrs. Martin? Graham Whitfield's deep voice cut through the shuffle of departing executives. Would you please stay for a moment? Evie's heart skipped. She turned slowly, clutching a stack of used paper napkins, conscious of her worn uniform and practical shoes. The CEO stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding yet kind. The remaining board members paused their exit, curious. Of course, Mr. Whitfield. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Graham smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. Please, everyone, take your seats again. He gestured to the leather chairs. This won't take long, but it's important. Chase Delaney, who had been slinking toward the door, reluctantly returned to his seat. His earlier smugness had vanished, replaced by a pale unease. Other executives settled back, their expressions ranging from confused to intrigued. What we witnessed this morning, Graham began, his voice carrying easily across the room, was extraordinary. Not just the language skills, though those were impressive. He walked around the table, his steady gaze fixed on Evie. What struck me most was the grace under pressure, the dignity in the face of disrespect, and the willingness to help despite having every reason not to. Evie's cheeks burned. She wished she could disappear into the plush carpet beneath her feet. The cleaning cart stood like a familiar friend just behind her, its handles worn smooth from years of use. These are the qualities of true leadership, Graham continued. Mrs. Martin, how long have you worked here? 7 years, sir, she answered softly. Night shift, mostly. Graham nodded thoughtfully. 7 years of dedication, showing up every night, doing essential work that keeps this company running. He turned to address the room. And in those 7 years, how many of us took the time to learn her name, to ask about her story? The silence in the room grew heavy. Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. I've been watching this morning's interaction carefully, Graham said. Mrs. Martin didn't just translate words, she built bridges. She showed cultural intelligence, emotional awareness, and most importantly, she demonstrated the kind of character we claim to value in our corporate mission statement. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card, placing it carefully on the table, which is why, effective immediately, I'm appointing Evelyn Martin as our new Vice President of Community and Global Partnerships. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Chase's mouth fell open. Evie grabbed the handle of her mop for support, certain she had misheard. Mr. Whitfield, she stammered. I'm just a cleaner. No, Graham said firmly. You're a bridge builder. You're someone who sees people, not positions. You have skills we desperately need, and perspectives we've been missing. He smiled warmly. The HR paperwork will take a few days to process, but the position is yours if you want it. Evie's legs felt weak. The fluorescent lights seemed suddenly too bright. The room too small. She looked down at her hands that had scrubbed countless floors, polished endless windows, hands that had once graded French essays and wiped away her children's tears. This is irregular, one of the board members muttered. So is ignoring talent right under our noses? Graham responded calmly. He turned back to Evie. What do you say, Mrs. Martin? Ready to help us build some bridges? Evie's fingers tightened around the familiar wooden handle of her mop. The instrument of her livelihood these past 7 years now felt like an anchor, keeping her steady in this surreal moment. Around her, the whispers continued, some excited, some skeptical, all astonished. Sometimes leadership wears work shoes, Graham said softly, understanding in his eyes. Iris Henderson's heels clicked purposefully across the polished floor as she approached Evie, who was still standing by her cleaning cart, fingers wrapped tightly around its familiar handle. The HR director's pearl necklace caught the morning light as she extended her hand. Mrs. Martin, if you could join me in my office, we have some paperwork to begin. Iris's tone was professional but kind, her smile genuine if slightly uncertain. Evie glanced down at her work uniform, suddenly aware of the lemon-scented cleaning spray in her pocket and the dust on her sensible shoes. Of course, though, she gestured at her attire with a self-conscious laugh. You're perfect just as you are. Graham interjected, appearing beside them. Iris, could we use the small conference room instead? More comfortable. Minutes later, Evie sat at the gleaming conference table, a stack of forms before her. Her hands, roughened by years of work with cleaning solutions, trembled slightly as she picked up the pen. We'll need your employment history, Iris said gently, sliding a form across the table. Previous positions, educational background. Evie's throat tightened. She set the pen down and folded her hands in her lap, gathering courage. I should be honest from the start. Her voice was soft but steady. I used to teach French at Gateway Community College. That was 15 years ago now. Graham leaned forward in his chair, interest flickering across his face. Iris paused in her note-taking. I loved teaching, Evie continued, her eyes growing distant with memory. My students were wonderful. Working adults, immigrants, young people trying to better themselves. A small smile touched her lips. But then my son, Daniel, got sick. Leukemia. The room grew very still. Evie's fingers twisted in her lap. The insurance. It wasn't enough. The treatments, the specialists, everything cost so much. I took out loans, used credit cards, started missing classes to be at the hospital. She drew a shaky breath. Daniel fought so hard, but after 18 months, Graham's face softened with compassion. Even Iris's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine sympathy. The medical bills kept coming. I lost the teaching position, couldn't keep up with the payments. Eventually, there was. Evie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Bankruptcy. She straightened her shoulders, meeting their eyes directly. Maya, my daughter, was in nursing school then. I promised myself she wouldn't have to drop out. Night cleaning paid decent wages, had good benefits. Carmen took a chance on me, even with my complicated history. I've been here 7 years now. Iris was making careful notes, her expression thoughtful. And your French fluency remained strong all this time? I practice when I clean, Evie admitted. Talk to myself in French, conjugate verbs, translate signs and documents I see. It keeps my mind sharp during the quiet hours. And, she smiled slightly, I sing hymns in French sometimes. The acoustics in the empty building are lovely. Graham, who had been listening intently, suddenly chuckled. That explains the beautiful singing the security guards mentioned hearing late at night. Evie blushed. Oh dear, I didn't realize anyone could hear that. Mrs. Martin, Iris said carefully, while your story is touching and your language skills are clearly exceptional, I need to be direct. A vice president position typically requires extensive management experience, advanced degrees, a certain kind of background. She glanced meaningfully at Graham. Iris. Graham's voice was gentle but firm. What I saw in that boardroom today was leadership in its purest form. Dignity under pressure. Grace in the face of contempt. The ability to bridge worlds and bring people together. Those aren't skills you learn in business school. But the board, Iris began, will see what I see, Graham interrupted. A woman who lifted herself and her family through impossible circumstances, who kept her mind sharp and her spirit kind despite every setback. He turned to Evie. Your background isn't a liability, Mrs. Martin. It's exactly why we need you. Evie's eyes filled with tears she couldn't quite hold back. I don't want to disappoint anyone's faith in me. You won't, Graham said simply. Iris sighed, but there was a hint of a smile on her face as she pushed the forms forward again. Well then, Mrs. Martin, shall we continue? We have quite a bit of paperwork to get through. After completing the initial forms, Evie excused herself. In the pristine executive bathroom, she locked herself in a stall and finally let the tears flow freely. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming emotion she couldn't quite name. Lord, she whispered, her voice trembling. What have you done? The apartment door clicked open at 7:30 p.m., and Maya's tired footsteps echoed in the narrow hallway. She was still in her blue scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun after a long shift at St. Luke's Hospital. Before she could even set down her bag, rapid footsteps thundered from the back bedroom. Mommy! Nana! Look what I made! 7-year-old Jonah burst out of his room, clutching a handful of brightly colored sticky notes. His socks didn't match, and his glasses sat slightly crooked on his nose. Evie stood at the stove, stirring yesterday's chicken and rice. The familiar scent of home cooking filled their small kitchen, but her hands trembled slightly as she worked. She changed out of her cleaning uniform into a worn floral dress, her silver-streaked hair now loose around her shoulders. "Baby, let Mommy put her things down first," Evie said softly. But Maya was already crouching to receive Jonah's enthusiastic hug. "It's okay, Mom." Maya squeezed her son tight, then looked up at Evie with knowing eyes. "You're home early. Everything all right?" Evie set the wooden spoon down and wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Maybe we should sit down for a minute." "Are you sick?" Maya's nurse instincts kicked in immediately, her tired face sharpening with concern. No, nothing like that." Evie pulled out a kitchen chair. "It's just been an unusual day." Jonah climbed onto his own chair, sticky notes still clutched in his small fist.
"Tell us, Nana. Did something good happen? You look all sparkly inside."
Maya sat too, reaching across to touch her mother's hand.
Mom?
Evie took a deep breath. "Well, you know how I've been cleaning at Whitfield Corp for almost 6 years now? Did they fire you?" Maya's voice turned sharp. "Because if they did..." "Maya, honey." Evie squeezed her daughter's hand. "They didn't fire me. They promoted me." "Promoted?" Maya's eyebrows shot up. "To head of cleaning staff. To vice president." The kitchen went completely silent. Even Jonah stopped fidgeting with his sticky notes. "Vice president?" Maya's voice cracked. "Of what?" "Community and global partnerships." Evie said it slowly, still hardly believing the words herself. "It happened this morning. There was a French client, and the interpreter was late, and I helped." "You spoke French?" Jonah's eyes went wide behind his glasses.
"Like in the movies?"
"Like I used to teach, sweetheart." Evie smiled at her grandson.
"Before you were born. When your uncle..."
Her voice caught for a moment. "When things were different." Maya stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum.
"This doesn't make sense! They can't just... Mom, these corporate types, they're not like us!"
"They play games. What if they're setting you up?" "Maya Rose Martin." Evie's voice grew firm. "Sit down, please." Maya sat, but her jaw remained tight with worry. "I just don't want you getting hurt. You remember what happened at the college?" "I remember everything." Evie's voice was gentle but steady. "The medical bills, the bankruptcy, the nights you studied nursing while I cleaned offices. But maybe God is opening a door here. Did they give you a contract? Healthcare? What about your pension?" Maya fired the questions rapidly, her protective instincts in full force. "The HR director, Iris, is handling all that tomorrow." Evie reached for the pot on the stove. "Right now, I'd just like to have dinner with my family and—"
"Nana!"
Jonah interrupted, practically bouncing in his chair.
"I have something."
He smoothed out a gold star sticker on a bright blue sticky note and wrote carefully in his child's handwriting, "For speaking French like a queen." "Oh, sweetheart." Evie's eyes misted as Jonah hopped down and stuck it carefully on the large mason jar on the counter, her kindness points collection that he'd started months ago. "And look." He grabbed another sticky note, this one pink. "For being brave at work." Another gold star went on the jar. Maya watched her son decorating the jar, her expression softening.
"You really want this, Mom?"
"I think." Evie began dishing out the chicken and rice. "I think I need to try. For all of us. For myself. But you'll have to buy new clothes, and there'll be meetings, and those people." Maya's voice wavered. "They won't understand where we come from." "Then maybe it's time they learned." Evie set full plates in front of both of them. "Remember what Pastor Lila always says? God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called." Jonah picked up his fork. "Will you still be home to help me with homework?" "We'll figure it out, baby." Evie touched his cheek.
"Some things might change, but not what matters most."
Maya took a bite of chicken, then suddenly laughed, a sound caught between worry and pride. "Vice President Martin. My mama. The VP. More like Nana the Queen," Jonah declared, making both women laugh louder. They ate together in their small kitchen, where the wallpaper was faded and the overhead light flickered sometimes. The food was simple. Leftover chicken and rice, green beans from a can, but the love around the table was rich and deep. Their laughter mingled with Maya's lingering concerns, with Jonah's excited chatter about teaching the suit people his kindness point system, with Evie's own butterflies about tomorrow. "Just promise me one thing," Maya said, helping herself to seconds. Promise you won't let them change who you are.
Oh, honey. Evie reached across the table to touch her daughter's cheek. The only changes I'm interested in are the ones that lift others up. Like someone who cleaned offices so her daughter could become a nurse. Jonah looked up from his plate. Can I visit your new office, Nana? I'll wear my clip-on tie. The morning sun glinted off the towering glass headquarters of Whitfield Industries, but its warmth did little to calm Evie's nerves. She stood at the entrance, her worn leather purse clutched tightly against her navy blue blazer, the nicest one she owned, bought 3 years ago for Maya's nursing school graduation. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the door handle. Just yesterday, she'd entered through the service entrance with her mop and bucket. Today, she was supposed to walk through the main doors as a vice president. The thought made her stomach flutter. The lobby felt different in the morning rush. Executives in crisp suits strode purposefully across the marble floors, their shoes clicking importantly. Conversations hushed as she passed. Young associates huddled near the coffee cart, stealing glances and whispering behind paper cups. Did you hear Graham just promoted the cleaning lady? Just like that? No process? Must be some kind of PR move. Each whispered comment stung like a paper cut. Evie kept her chin up, though her cheeks burned. She'd faced worse, she reminded herself. The bankruptcy court had been harder. The pediatric ICU waiting room had been harder. Near the elevators, she spotted Harold Delaney's imposing figure. The board chair's face was flushed red as he jabbed his finger at a document, speaking in harsh whispers to 2 other board members. Even from a distance, his words carried. Completely unprecedented. 25 years of established hiring protocol thrown out the window. He shook the paper. No MBA, no corporate experience, not even a current bachelor's degree. Graham's gone too far this time. One of the other board members nodded. The optics are concerning. It looks like we're trying too hard to appear progressive. A token promotion if I ever saw one, the third man added. What's next? Promoting the cafeteria staff to CFO? Evie's hand tightened on her purse strap as she waited for the elevator. She focused on her breathing, the way Pastor Lila had taught her during those dark days after Tommy's death. In, out, trust, release. The elevator dinged, and she stepped in alongside 3 young executives who immediately stopped talking. The silence was deafening as they rode up. Evie could feel their sideways glances, their judgment of her sensible shoes and department store clothes. On the executive floor, Carmen was waiting by the water cooler. Her former supervisor's, face was tight with concern. Evie! Carmen pulled her aside, voice low and urgent. They're circling like sharks. Harold Delaney's been in and out of meetings all morning. He's talking about reviewing Graham's authority to make unilateral appointments. Evie's throat felt dry. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but listen to me. Carmen gripped her arm. These people? They'll test you. They'll try to make you quit. They don't want to get their hands dirty by firing you. Bad press. They want you to feel so uncomfortable you'll leave on your own. A young woman in designer heels clip-clopped past them, nose wrinkled as if she'd smelled something unpleasant. More whispers followed. Did you hear? She was mopping floors just yesterday. Graham's lost his mind. What client will take us seriously now? Carmen's eyes flashed. Don't let them see you flinch, mi amiga. You earned this chance. Show them what the night shift taught you about persistence. Evie managed a weak smile. I appreciate you looking out for me, Carmen. Always have. Just don't forget where you came from, Carmen warned. These fancy people, they're not your friends. They'll smile to your face and stab you in the back. As if to prove Carmen's point, Chase Delaney emerged from his office, spotted Evie, and made a show of checking his watch. Oh good, the cleaning staff is here. Though I suppose we should say, Vice President now. His tone dripped with sarcasm. I hope you at least know how to use Microsoft Office. A few nearby associates snickered. Evie felt her face flush, but she met Chase's gaze steadily. I believe I still have something of yours, Mr. Delaney. She reached into her purse and pulled out his monogrammed cufflink. You dropped this yesterday. Chase's smirk faltered slightly as she held it out. He snatched it quickly, stuffing it into his pocket without a word before stalking off. Evie watched him go, then turned toward the window wall. The city stretched out below, bathed in morning light. From up here, the streets where she'd raised her children looked small, but no less real. She thought of Maya's determination through nursing school, of little Jonah's gold stars for kindness, of Tommy's brave smile in the hospital. Lord, she whispered,
pressing her palm against the cool glass. I don't understand your timing, but if you open this door, she straightened her shoulders, feeling strength flow into her spine. Then I'll walk through it. Help me walk through it with grace. The whispers continued behind her. Emails were probably flying. Harold Delaney was likely already planning his next move. But Evie Martin stood tall, watching the sun rise over her city, ready to face whatever came next. Graham's office felt different in the daylight. Evie sat perched on the edge of a leather chair, her old cleaning uniform replaced by the navy blazer she'd worn to Maya's graduation. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting dust motes that danced in the air, spots she used to clean during her night shifts. Evie, Graham said warmly, settling into his chair. How are you holding up? She paused, choosing honesty over pretense. I'm nervous, sir, but grateful. Graham's eyes crinkled with understanding. Please, it's Graham now, and nervous is normal, but you've already shown exactly why you belong here. He pulled out a folder and spread several papers across his desk. VP of Community and Global Partnerships. It's a new position, one we desperately need. You'll be building bridges between our company and the communities we serve. Evie nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. She thought of all the conversations she'd had over the years. With security guards working double shifts to pay for their children's college, with maintenance workers who knew every squeaky hinge in the building, with cleaning staff who heard customer complaints firsthand. I'd like to start with an idea, she said, her voice growing stronger. Something I've been thinking about during my night shifts. Go on. Graham leaned forward, interested. Bridge teams, Evie said, the words tumbling out with unexpected confidence. Pairing executives with night shift workers to identify and solve real customer problems. The night staff, they hear things, see things. They know what's broken before anyone else does. She remembered Carmen's frustrated sighs about the lobby's automatic doors that kept sticking, confusing elderly customers. The security guard who noticed how many parents struggled with strollers at the entrance. The executives bring the authority to make changes, she continued, and the night staff brings the ground-level insight. Together, they could spot and fix problems before they become complaints. Graham's face lit up with interest. He grabbed a pen and started taking notes. Give me an example. Last month, Carmen, my supervisor, noticed that elderly customers were struggling with the weight of the main doors during early morning hours when the automatic system was offline for maintenance. She mentioned it to me while I was cleaning, but there wasn't really a way to pass that information up the chain. If we had bridge teams, the executive partner could fast-track a solution, Graham finished, nodding enthusiastically. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need, Evie. Fresh perspectives, real solutions. He stood up and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. But I need to be honest with you. The board, he turned to face her. They're not all convinced about your appointment. Harold Delaney is particularly vocal about it. You'll need to prove the value of your ideas quickly. Evie's stomach tightened, but she lifted her chin. How long do I have? The next board meeting is in 3 weeks. Show them something concrete by then. Graham led her down the hallway to a small conference room. It's not much, but it's yours for now. We'll find you proper office space soon. The room was modest but bright, with a decent-sized desk and a window overlooking the city. A computer sat ready, its screen dark and waiting. It felt surreal. This space that was now hers. Thank you, Evie said softly, for taking a chance on me. Graham paused at the door. I'm not taking a chance, Evie. I'm making an investment. Make those bridge teams happen. After he left, Evie sat down at her new desk, running her hands along its smooth surface. How many times had she polished desks just like this one? She pulled out her key ring, the one that had opened supply closets and cleaning cupboards for the past 5 years. The metal was worn smooth from use. She placed the keys carefully on the corner of her desk. From mop to meetings, she whispered to herself. The real battle had begun. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar evening song as Evie walked the empty halls of the corporate headquarters. It was 10:45 p.m., her usual start time. She'd changed back into her cleaning uniform, the fabric soft and worn from countless nights of work. Carmen had insisted she didn't need to finish her last shift, but Evie knew better. Every goodbye deserved its proper time. You're crazy, girl, Carmen said, shaking her head as she handed Evie her cart one last time. Most people would be home celebrating. This is my celebration, Evie replied, patting the cleaning supplies. These halls raised me up. I want to thank them properly. She started with the ground floor bathrooms, where she'd once found a young intern crying over a failed presentation. Evie had shared her emergency chocolate stash that night, along with some motherly wisdom. The memory made her smile as she wiped down the mirrors until they gleamed. Next came the break rooms, where late-night security guards had shared their coffee with her. Each table got an extra thorough polish. In accounting, where Dave always left her thank you notes for emptying his overflowing recycling bin, she straightened the photos on his desk one final time. The executive floor felt different tonight. Tomorrow she'd walk these halls in different shoes. But tonight, she was still their caretaker. She moved through each office methodically, her movements a familiar dance. When she reached Chase Delaney's office, she paused. The cufflink felt heavy in her pocket where she'd carried it these past 2 days. She placed it carefully on his desk, alongside a handwritten note. Found this during night cleaning. I believe you can be better than your worst moment, Evie Martin. She was emptying his wastepaper basket when the door creaked. Chase stood there, jacket off, tie loosened, looking startled to find her. Mr. Delaney, she said quietly. I left something on your desk. He walked over, picking up the cufflink and note. His face tightened as he read her words. I don't need your pity, he said, but his voice lacked its usual edge. It's not pity, Evie replied, meeting his eyes. It's faith. Everyone deserves a chance to grow, including you. Chase's jaw worked as if chewing on words he couldn't quite swallow. Finally, he muttered. You should have thrown it away after how I treated you. That's exactly why I didn't. Evie smiled gently. Kindness isn't about what people deserve. It's about who we choose to be. He scoffed, but something flickered in his expression. Discomfort, maybe recognition. Without another word, he pocketed the cufflink and strode out, leaving Evie to finish her task. The boardroom was her last stop. She ran her hands along the table she'd polished countless times, remembering yesterday's transformation. Thank you for being my stage, she whispered to the empty room. Finally, well past midnight, she pushed her cart back to the supply closet for the last time. Carmen was waiting with 2 paper cups of coffee. To new beginnings, Carmen said, raising her cup. And old friendships, Evie finished, clinking their cups together. After hugging Carmen goodbye, Evie took the elevator to the 14th floor. Her new office, really just a converted conference room, waited at the end of the hall. The borrowed desk and chairs looked lonely in the moonlight. A single box sat on the desk, containing her few personal items. A photo of Maya and Jonah, her worn Bible, and a small plant Carmen had given her as a congratulations gift. Jonah's sticky note came out of her purse last. Be brave, Nana, was written in his wobbly 7-year-old handwriting, decorated with gold stars. She taped it carefully to the computer monitor where she'd see it first thing each morning. The room felt vast and empty, so different from her supply closet downstairs. Evie sank into her new chair, her chair, and looked out at the city lights twinkling below. The weight of tomorrow pressed against her chest, meetings to lead, strategies to create, bridges to build between worlds she knew so well. This room is yours, Lord, she whispered, folding her hands in her lap. The words echoed slightly in the bare space, a prayer and a promise wrapped together. The evening sun painted warm stripes across the worn wooden pews of Grace Community Church as hymns filled the air. Evie sat in her usual spot in the alto section, her choir folder open to Amazing Grace. Around her, familiar faces smiled. Encouragement. They'd all heard about her promotion through the church prayer chain. Pastor Lila stood before the choir, her silver hair catching the light as she raised her hands. Remember, each note has its purpose, even when we can't hear the harmony yet. Trust that it's there. Her knowing glance settled on Evie. After rehearsal, Pastor Lila motioned Evie to join her in the church kitchen. Steam rose from a pot of chicken noodle soup on the old stove, Pastor Lila's signature comfort food. The aroma of herbs and warmth filled the small space. Sit, child, Pastor Lila said, ladling soup into 2 ceramic bowls. Tell me what's weighing on your heart. Evie wrapped her hands around the warm bowl. I feel like I'm in over my head. These executives, they've gone to fancy schools, they have degrees. I'm just the woman God chose for this moment. Pastor Lila finished firmly. She stirred her soup thoughtfully. Remember what David said about Goliath? He didn't try to wear Saul's armor. He used what God had already placed in his hands, a slingshot and 5 stones. Evie smiled faintly. I've got a mop and some French. And wisdom earned in the valley, Pastor Lila added. Don't discount your journey, Evie. Those night shifts taught you things no Harvard degree could. The kitchen door creaked open, and Carmen poked her head in. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. She joined them at the table, accepting a bowl of soup gratefully. Evie pulled out a notebook. I've been thinking about these bridge teams. Carmen, I need your help to make this work. Carmen raised an eyebrow. Me? I'm just a supervisor. You know every person on that night shift. Their strengths, their struggles, their ideas. We need that knowledge. For the next hour, they brainstormed over cooling soup. Carmen suggested practical pairings. Miguel from maintenance with the facilities director. Sarah from reception with customer service. Evie scribbled notes, adding questions for the roundtable discussions. We'll need to address the elephant in the room, Carmen said finally. Some of these executives think they're too good to work with cleaning staff. Pastor Lila hummed thoughtfully. Sometimes the strongest bridges are built by the humblest hands. That's it! Evie's eyes lit up. She wrote quickly. What can we learn from each other? We'll start with sharing stories. Everyone has dignity, everyone has wisdom. The church clock chimed 9. Evie gathered her things, hugging Pastor Lila. Thank you for the soup and the courage. Sing your note, child, Pastor Lila called after her. That's all any of us can do. At home, Maya was sprawled on the couch in her scrubs, medical textbook open on her lap. She looked up as Evie entered. How was choir? Evie settled beside her daughter, showing her the notebook. I think I found a way forward. See these teams? We pair executives with night staff to solve real problems together. Maya frowned, protective instinct flaring. Mom, these corporate types, they could humiliate you. Or they could surprise us, Evie countered gently. Remember when you first started nursing, how scared you were of making mistakes? That was different, was it? You learned to trust yourself. Now it's my turn. Maya's expression softened. She squeezed her mother's hand. Just be careful, okay? I can't bear to see you hurt. Later that night, Evie stood in the empty office corridor, taping meeting notices to department doors. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed each page. Bridge Teams Initiative. Building solutions together. All levels welcome. First meeting, Tuesday, 8 a.m. The paper felt flimsy under her fingers, but the words felt strong. She thought of Pastor Lila's quiet confidence, Carmen's practical wisdom, Maya's fierce love. Perhaps this was what faith looked like. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to take one more step anyway. She posted the last notice on the executive floor, her reflection ghostly in the dark glass windows. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight, she had done what she could, planting seeds of hope in fluorescent-lit halls. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Conference Room B, casting long shadows across platters of glazed donuts and steaming coffee carafes. Evie had arrived early to arrange everything just right, the chocolate-frosted ones in front, because who could resist starting a meeting with chocolate? She smoothed her new navy blazer, bought on sale last weekend. The fabric still felt stiff and foreign compared to her familiar cleaning uniform. As she adjusted the agenda papers at each seat, her hands trembled slightly. This was her first real test as VP. By 8:55 a.m. they started filing in. The night shift workers came first, still tired from their rounds, led by Carmen in her practical work shoes. They clustered together near the door, eyeing the executive chairs uncertainly. The corporate staff arrived in waves of pressed suits and polished leather. Smartphones in hand, Chase Delaney slipped in last, hovering at the back wall. Please, everyone, help yourself to breakfast, Evie said warmly, gesturing to the spread. The maple bars are especially good. I got them from Pete's Bakery on Marion Street. A few custodians inched forward, but the executives stayed rooted. The divide in the room was as clear as a line drawn on the carpet. Evie took a deep breath. While you're getting settled, I want to thank you all for coming to our first Bridge Teams meeting. I know it's early for some and late for others. She smiled at Carmen, who gave her a subtle nod. Now I know what you're thinking, Evie continued, her voice gentle but firm. What could a VP and a night cleaner possibly have in common? Well, that's exactly what we're here to explore. Because I believe the best solutions come when we combine different perspectives. She picked up a stack of index cards. On these cards, I've written real customer complaints from the past month. Things like slow response times, communication gaps, service issues. What I'd like to do is pair you up. One operations staff member with one corporate team member. To tackle these challenges together. A murmur rippled through the room. Chase shifted uncomfortably against the wall. For example, Evie pressed on. Did you know that Marco, who cleans the customer service floor, hears more customer feedback through the evening cleaning rounds than our formal surveys capture? Or that Janet in accounting has ideas about streamlining our supply ordering that could save us thousands? Carmen stepped forward, coffee cup in hand.
Hey, some of us might even know how to count past 10,
she quipped with a wink. Surprised laughter broke out, easing the tension like a valve releasing steam. Evie smiled gratefully at her friend. Exactly. So, let's mix it up. Mr. Thompson from legal. Would you mind partnering with Luis from maintenance? And Sarah from marketing. You'll be with Carmen. One by one, she matched unlikely pairs, watching as chairs scraped and people slowly migrated toward their new partners. Some looked awkward, others curious. Chase finally peeled himself from the wall when she paired him with Marco. Now take a look at your card, Evie instructed. These are real issues affecting real customers. I want you to spend the next 30 minutes brainstorming solutions. But here's the key. Both partners must contribute. The person you might least expect could have the missing piece you need. The room hummed with hesitant conversation that gradually grew more animated. Iris, the HR director, sat in the corner taking rapid notes, her eyebrows rising occasionally with interest. Evie circulated among the groups, listening and encouraging. She paused by Carmen's table, where the supervisor was gesturing enthusiastically to Sarah from marketing about the worn-out signs in the lobby. Those fancy digital displays you want, Carmen was saying. They're nice, but half our elderly customers can't read them. What if we kept both? Traditional signs at eye level, digital ones above? Sarah's eyes lit up. A hybrid approach that could work for all age groups, and we could test it in high-traffic areas first. At another table, Marco was explaining to Chase how customers often complained about the phone system while he cleaned their offices after hours. They say they press buttons for 10 minutes and still can't reach a real person, Marco said. Maybe we need fewer options, make it simpler? Chase leaned forward, actually listening. What if we added a callback feature? Then they wouldn't have to wait on hold at all. The energy in the room shifted like a tide coming in, barriers dissolving in the face of shared purpose. Even the donuts were finally disappearing, chocolate frosted ones first, just as Evie had hoped. As the 30 minutes drew to a close, each team presented their ideas. The solutions were practical, creative, and clearly born from both worlds colliding. Iris's pen flew across her notepad, capturing every suggestion. This is exactly what bridge teams are about, Evie concluded, her heart full. Not just solving problems, but building understanding. Thank you all for taking this leap of faith. Same time next week? Heads nodded. People lingered, exchanging contact information and continuing discussions. Carmen caught Evie's eye and mouthed, "Not bad, boss," with a grin. When the last person filed out, Evie stepped into the quiet hallway. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling it soar with something she hadn't experienced in years. The pure joy of leading, of helping others find common ground. For a moment, she was no longer the former cleaning lady or the surprise VP, but simply herself, Evie Martin, building bridges one donut at a time. Evie stared at her computer screen, trying to calm her nerves. The little green notification light blinked insistently, a message from Renee Dubois, requesting a virtual meeting with her Paris team in 2 hours. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure how to respond. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, adjusting the small cross necklace Maya had given her for Christmas. The conference room she'd been using as a temporary office felt particularly empty this morning. She missed the familiar weight of her cleaning cart, the simple clarity of tasks to be done. Carmen poked her head in. "Need backup for your fancy French meeting?" "Just prayer," Evie said with a weak smile. "And maybe help with this computer setup? I'm still learning all these buttons." Together they tested the video connection and microphone. Carmen squeezed Evie's shoulder before leaving. "Show them what a night cleaner can do." At exactly 2 p.m. Paris time, faces began popping up on the screen. Evie recognized Renee's elegant silver hair and pearl earrings immediately. Behind her, a dozen well-dressed French executives sat around a glossy table, their expressions curious but reserved. "Bonjour, Madame Martin," Renee began warmly.
"I hope we find you well?"
"Oui, merci beaucoup," Evie replied, her French flowing more naturally now. She'd been practicing in the evenings, reading old textbooks to Jonah, who loved the musical sound of the words even if he didn't understand them. Renee made introductions, and Evie carefully noted each name, determined to show proper respect. As she responded to their greetings, she noticed several eyebrows raise in appreciation of her accent. "Before we discuss business," Renee said, leaning forward slightly, "I have a story to share." She paused, her eyes finding Evie's through the screen. "My mother was a seamstress in the 18th arrondissement of Paris, not the fancy fashion houses. She mended work clothes and altered wedding dresses in our tiny apartment." The other executives shifted, some looking uncomfortable. Clearly, this was news to them as well. "Every night," Renee continued, "I would fall asleep to the sound of her sewing machine. She worked until midnight, sometimes later, but she always sang while she worked. Old French folk songs, church hymns, like someone else I know." She smiled knowingly at Evie. Evie's throat tightened. She thought of her own late-night humming, the quiet comfort of melody in empty halls. "When I was young," Renee went on, "many doors were closed to me because of where I came from. But my mother taught me that dignity isn't given by others. It comes from how we carry ourselves and treat those around us." The room had grown very still, both in Paris and St. Louis. Evie felt tears threatening but held them back. "So when I saw you that first morning, Madame Martin, I recognized something. Not just in your French, which is magnificent, but in your grace under pressure, your respect for everyone, regardless of position." Renee's gaze grew more intense. "Our company is considering a significant contract with yours, but I need to know this wasn't a one-time performance, that your promotion signals real change in how your organization views and values all its people." She gestured to her team. "We have some questions about your Bridge Teams initiative. We'd like to understand how you plan to sustain it." For the next hour, Evie explained her vision, switching smoothly between French and English as needed. She shared stories from the night shift, the wisdom she'd learned from Carmen and others who kept the building running while executives slept. She described customer problems solved because someone finally asked the people who saw them every day. The Paris team leaned in, engaged. They asked sharp questions about metrics and scalability, but also human ones about trust building and cultural change. Evie answered honestly, admitting when she was still figuring things out but showing her commitment to learning. Finally, Renee held up a hand. "I have seen enough for today." She picked up a document, holding it so the camera could capture it clearly. "This is our preliminary contract, with one special addition. A joint scholarship program for service workers pursuing education. We will match your company's investment." Evie's heart leaped. She thought of all the others like her, dreams deferred by circumstance. "The final signing depends on seeing this inclusive leadership sustained," Renee continued. "Not just in you, Madame Martin, but throughout the organization. Show us this is real change, not window dressing." "I understand," Evie said softly. "Thank you for this opportunity to prove ourselves worthy of your trust." Renee's eyes crinkled. "My mother would have liked you very much, I think. Au revoir, Madame Martin." The screen went dark. Evie sat back in her chair, her heart racing. The magnitude of what had just happened, both the potential contract and the weight of responsibility, crashed over her like a wave. "Lord," she whispered, looking up at the ceiling, "you've given me another test." The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main conference room, casting a warm glow over the assembled group. Executives in pressed suits sat shoulder to shoulder with maintenance staff still in their work uniforms. The energy in the room crackled with excitement as the first Bridge teams prepared to present their findings. Evie stood at the front, her hands steady now as she arranged her notes. She'd traded her cleaning uniform for a modest navy dress, but wore her comfortable work shoes, a reminder of where she came from. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice soft but clear. "1 month ago, we started an experiment. We asked people who rarely talk to each other to become partners in solving real problems. The first team, Roger from accounting and Maria from the night cleaning crew shared how they'd streamlined the building's supply ordering system. "We cut waste by 40%, Maria announced proudly, pointing to their charts. Team after team presented their discoveries. The maintenance crew had identified shortcuts in shipping that the office staff had never noticed. The security guards had suggestions about customer service that made perfect sense. They were the ones who talked to visitors first, after all. Graham Whitfield leaned forward in his chair, nodding with growing enthusiasm. Even Iris, usually so reserved, was taking rapid notes. "But the real proof," Evie said, "came yesterday." She held up a cream-colored envelope. "This letter arrived from Mr. James Wilson, a veteran who's been our customer for 20 years. The room grew quiet as Evie began to read. "Dear Sir or Madam, I'm not one for writing companies, but I had to tell you what happened last week. My medical supplies usually take 3 days to arrive. I was running low and worried sick. But this time, someone called to check on me. They said they'd found a way to speed things up. My supplies came the very next day." The young lady explained that a cleaning worker had mentioned to her manager that elderly customers often struggled with the wait times. She said everyone put their heads together to fix it. "For the first time in years, I felt like a person, not just an account number. I served this country for 27 years. All I ever wanted was to be treated with dignity. Your people did that. God bless them all. Sincerely, James Wilson, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, retired." Evie looked up to see several people wiping their eyes. Carmen beamed from her seat, while Chase Delaney stared at his hands, looking thoughtful. 24 hours, Graham announced, standing. "We cut our delivery time by 2 full days because people who never spoke before started listening to each other." He turned to Evie. "This is exactly what we needed." The room burst into applause. Evie saw custodians and executives exchanging proud smiles, the invisible walls between them crumbling just a little more. Later that evening, Evie's small kitchen was filled with the scent of coffee and the sound of happy chatter. Maya had brought home a chocolate cream pie from the diner where they often gathered to celebrate small victories. Now it sat in the center of the worn kitchen table, already half-eaten. "And then," Carmen was saying, gesturing with her fork, "this fancy executive asks Maria where she learned such good business sense. Maria tells him she ran her own shop back in Guatemala for 10 years. She shook her head, grinning. The look on his face. Maya laughed, but Evie caught the worried glance her daughter tried to hide. She knew Maya still feared this was too good to last. Jonah bounced in his chair, waiting impatiently with a gold star sticker in his hand. "Can I do it now, Mama? Can I?" Maya nodded, and Jonah rushed to the windowsill where Evie kept her kindness points jar. The glass container sparkled with dozens of gold stars, each marking a moment of grace in this strange journey. "This one," Jonah announced with 7-year-old solemnity, "is for helping strangers become friends." He pressed the star carefully onto the jar's surface. "That's perfect, mijo," Carmen said softly, reaching over to ruffle his hair. The conversation flowed easily around the table. Maya shared stories from her nursing shift. Carmen talked about her grandson's baseball game. Jonah demonstrated his new karate moves, nearly knocking over his milk. Evie sat back, soaking in the moment. The weight of her new responsibilities, the stares and whispers at work, all of it felt lighter somehow. Here, in her kitchen, with pie and laughter and love, she felt the rightness of everything that had happened. "More coffee?" she offered, standing to get the pot. "Always," Carmen replied with a wink. Maya cut another slice of pie, dividing it carefully. "This is better than that fancy lunch they served at your meeting, isn't it, Mom?" "Much better," Evie agreed, refreshing everyone's cups. The coffee wasn't expensive, the plates didn't match, and the kitchen light flickered sometimes. But the warmth in this room, the genuine joy in these faces, this was wealth beyond counting. Jonah had fallen asleep in his chair, chocolate smeared at the corner of his mouth. Maya gathered him up gently, his head dropping onto her shoulder. "Time to get this one to bed," she whispered. "Early shift tomorrow." Carmen stood too, gathering her purse. "Walk me out?" Evie followed her friend to the door. They stood for a moment on the small porch, looking up at the stars scattered across the St. Louis sky. "You did good today, Evie," Carmen said simply. "Real good." They hugged goodbye, and Evie watched Carmen walk to her car, waving until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Inside, she could hear Maya singing softly to Jonah as she got him ready for bed. The kitchen needed cleaning, but Evie lingered at the table for a moment longer, savoring the remnants of their celebration. The empty pie plate, the coffee cups with lipstick marks, Carmen's forgotten napkin with doodles in the corners. All of it felt precious somehow. She touched the kindness points jar gently, Jonah's newest star gleaming under her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning it for everything. The promotion, the success today, this perfect evening with her family. Most of all, for the chance to build bridges where walls once stood. Chase Delaney sat in his corner office, the morning sun doing nothing to warm his mood. His laptop screen glowed with an empty document, the cursor blinking accusingly. The last month's successes of Evie's bridge teams gnawed at him like acid. He yanked his tie loose and paced to the window. 29 floors below, morning traffic crawled through downtown St. Louis. His reflection stared back at him, perfectly tailored suit, expertly styled hair, and a scowl that would make his father proud. "This isn't right," he muttered, returning to his desk. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing, "Memo, Risk Assessment, VP Community, Global Partnerships Appointment." The words flowed easier now, anger and wounded pride fueling each sentence. The spontaneous elevation of a maintenance worker to executive leadership represents an unprecedented risk to shareholder value, he wrote. While the appointment may generate positive press, it demonstrates a concerning pattern of emotion-driven decision-making by current leadership. Chase paused, remembering Evie's gentle words when she returned his cufflink. His chest tightened with something that felt uncomfortably like shame. He pushed the feeling aside and continued typing. By late afternoon, the memo had grown into a 5-page document filled with corporate jargon and thinly veiled attacks. Chase's assistant, Jennifer, knocked softly. "Your father called twice," she said. "He wants the risk assessment before tomorrow's board meeting." Chase nodded, scanning the document one last time. His mouse hovered over the send button. For a moment he saw Evie's face during the bridge team's presentation. Her quiet pride as veterans and elderly customers shared their stories of improved service. He clicked send anyway. That evening, in a dimly lit bar downtown, Chase nursed his second scotch. His phone buzzed, a text from an old fraternity brother who now worked at the St. Louis Business Journal. "Got something interesting on your cleaning lady VP," the text read. "Bankruptcy filing from 8 years ago. Want to comment?" Chase's finger trembled over the phone. He hadn't known about the bankruptcy, hadn't dug that deep. But he knew what would happen if this got out. His father had always said business was war, and in war you used every weapon. He took another sip of scotch and typed, "No comment, but you might want to look into her financial competency for such a senior role." The night grew darker. Chase ordered a third scotch he didn't need. His phone kept lighting up with notifications as the story spread. Local business blogs picked it up first. From bankruptcy to boardroom, questions arise about new VP's financial past. By midnight, social media accounts were sharing screenshots of court documents. The stories grew more twisted with each sharing. Failed French teacher becomes VP after bankruptcy. Became financially incompetent cleaner given executive role in Fortune 500 company. Chase scrolled through the comments, each one more vicious than the last. His head spun, and not just from the scotch. This wasn't what he'd wanted, was it? He'd wanted to prove a point, to protect the company's standards. But as he read comment after cruel comment, his victory felt hollow. He remembered the cufflink again, how Evie had handled it so carefully, wrapped it in tissue paper. "I believe you can be better than your bad moment," she'd said. He hadn't been better. He'd been much, much worse. The bartender called last orders. Chase paid his tab and stepped into the cool night air, his shoes clicking against empty sidewalks. The city lights blurred above him as his phone continued to buzz with notifications. At home, he couldn't sleep. He lay in his expensive sheets, watching the ceiling fan spin. The bankruptcy story had taken on a life of its own now. There would be no taking it back, no undoing what he'd started. His father would be pleased. They'd forced the board's hand. But the cost of that victory sat like lead in his stomach. Dawn crept over the city. Chase's phone rang. His father. "Well done, son." Harold Delaney's voice boomed. "The board's calling an emergency meeting. Graham's pet project is finished." Chase managed a weak, "Thanks, Dad," before hanging up. He opened his laptop, checking the morning news sites. The bankruptcy story had exploded overnight. Local TV stations were picking it up now. Questions surround controversial VP appointment. Across town, In a modest kitchen where fresh coffee brewed and a child's artwork decorated the fridge, Maya Martin burst through the door. Her scrubs were wrinkled from a long night shift, and her hand shook as she held up her phone to show her mother.
"Mom,"
she said, voice cracking.
"they're tearing you apart online."
Evie stood at the counter, still in her robe, a coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. Through the window behind her, the same sun that had witnessed Chase's memo now painted the morning sky in shades of pink and gold, beautiful and oblivious to the storm it illuminated. The glass doors of corporate headquarters gleamed in the gray morning light, but today they were barely visible behind a wall of reporters. Camera flashes burst like lightning, and microphones jutted forward like accusing fingers. The media crowd buzzed with excitement, hungry for their story. Through this chaos walked Evie Martin, her sensible shoes clicking steadily against the polished floor. Her navy blazer, bought second-hand but carefully pressed, hung properly on her shoulders, and her silver hair was neatly swept back. She clutched her worn leather purse close, the same one she'd carried for night shifts, now holding meeting notes instead of cleaning supplies. "Ms. Martin, what do you say about the bankruptcy allegations? Is it true you have no formal business education? How do you respond to claims this was just a publicity stunt?" The questions pelted her like hail, but Evie kept walking, spine straight, eyes forward. She'd learned long ago from cleaning floors that dignity wasn't in what others said about you, but in how you carried yourself through the storm. Security guards parted the crowd, creating a narrow path. "Ma'am," one nodded respectfully, though his eyes held concern. Evie managed a gentle smile, the same one she'd given him hundreds of times during her night shifts. The lobby felt different today. The marble floors she'd polished countless times seemed colder, and the morning light through the atrium windows cast harsh shadows. Employees who'd started greeting her warmly these past weeks now found reasons to study their phones or shuffle papers. Iris from HR stood waiting by the elevator bank, her usually warm brown eyes clouded with professional distance. Behind her stood Graham Whitfield, looking like he hadn't slept, his tie slightly askew. "Evelyn," Iris began, using her full name. "Never a good sign. Could you come with us, please?" They rode to the 30th floor in silence. The executive conference room, where just weeks ago Evie had demonstrated her perfect French, now felt like a courtroom. Iris gestured for Evie to sit. "Due to recent developments," Iris began carefully, "the board has decided to suspend your appointment pending a full review." She slid a document across the table. "This is temporary, you understand. Just until we can properly assess the situation," Graham cut in, his voice tight with contained anger. "This is completely procedural, Evie. I want you to know I'm fighting this." Evie looked at the paper, her eyes catching phrases like immediate effect and administrative leave. Her hands remained folded calmly in her lap, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I understand," she said softly, years of practice keeping the tremor from her voice. "You're doing your job, Iris." A young security officer, Kevin, whose daughter's college graduation photo she'd admired during late shifts, stepped into the room. His face was flushed with discomfort. "I'm sorry, Ms. Martin, but I'll need your badge and building access card." Evie reached for the lanyard around her neck, the plastic ID card showing her smiling face, so proud on that first day. Her fingers worked the clasp slowly, each movement deliberate and dignified. She placed them gently on the table, smoothing the lanyard flat. "Thank you for always being so kind, Kevin," she said. "How did Sarah's first week of teaching go?" Kevin's eyes welled up.
"She loves it, Miss Martin. The kids already adore her."
"That's wonderful," Evie smiled, though her own eyes burned. "Please tell her I'm proud of her." Graham stepped forward. "Let me walk you out, Evie." "No, thank you," she said firmly, rising from her chair. "I know the way." She walked through the office space one last time, past her borrowed conference room-turned office, past the bridge team's bulletin board filled with success stories, past Chase's empty desk where she'd returned his cufflink with grace. Her heels clicked steadily on the floor she'd mopped so many times before. The reporters were still waiting outside, their shouts now tinged with victory as they spotted her. But nature had joined her humiliation. Fat raindrops began falling from the steel-gray sky, sending the media scurrying for cover. Evie stepped out into the downpour, her blazer offering little protection. The bus stop bench sat empty 2 blocks away, rain drumming against its plastic shelter. Each step felt heavier than the last. Finally, alone under the bus shelter, Evie's careful composure cracked. Tears mixed with raindrops on her cheeks as she whispered, "Lord, I don't understand, but I'm listening." Thunder rolled overhead, and the rain fell harder, drumming against the shelter's roof. Evie Martin sat straight-backed on the bench, her clothes soaked through, whispering prayers through her tears as she waited for the bus that would take her home. The last rays of sunset filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Mark's Church, casting pools of colored light across the worn wooden pews. The ancient building settled into its evening quiet, creaking softly as if sighing after a long day. In the growing darkness, Evie Martin knelt alone in the front row, her hands clasped tightly together. Her shoulders trembled as she tried to hold back tears. The day's humiliation pressed down on her like a physical weight. The reporters shouted questions, the pitying looks from coworkers, the gentle but firm request for her badge. The memory of standing in the rain at the bus stop, dignity in tatters, made fresh tears spill onto her cheeks. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast space. "I thought I understood your plan. I thought." She trailed off, unable to continue. The click of sensible shoes on the wooden floor announced Pastor Lila's approach. The older woman moved quietly, settling into the pew beside Evie with the familiarity of long friendship. She didn't speak right away, letting the sacred silence wrap around them both. "I failed," Evie finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "I let everyone down. Maya, Jonah, the night shift workers who believed in me. Even Mr. Whitfield, who took such a chance." Pastor Lila reached over and covered Evie's clasped hands with her own weathered ones. "Child, do you remember what we sang last Sunday? Through every storm, His perfect peace." "But I don't feel peaceful," Evie admitted, turning to look at her friend. "I feel lost, humiliated. They dug up my darkest moment, Tommy's medical bills, the bankruptcy, and turned it into headlines about incompetence. Sometimes," Pastor Lila said softly, "our deepest wounds become our greatest testimony. Remember Joseph in Egypt? From prisoner to prime minister. God specializes in unexpected promotions." A ghost of a smile touched Evie's lips, but faded quickly. "This feels different. Maybe I reached too high. Maybe I should have stayed with my mop and bucket where I belonged." "Now that doesn't sound like the Evelyn Martin I know," Pastor Lila chided gently. "The woman who taught French while raising 3 children. The woman who held her family together through Tommy's illness. The woman who never stopped serving others, even when serving meant cleaning floors at midnight." Evie closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. The colored light from the windows had faded to deep blues and purples, matching her mood. "But why open this door just to let it slam in my face?" "Who says the door is closed?" Pastor Lila asked. "Sometimes God leads us into hallways of waiting to teach us something we couldn't learn any other way." The words struck something deep in Evie's heart. She straightened slightly, her breath catching. Suddenly, she felt the prayer rising from her soul, raw and honest. "Lord, if you open this door." Her voice broke, then steadied. "Show me how to stand in the hallway." Pastor Lila squeezed her hands. "That's it, child. That's the prayer He waits to hear." They sat together in the growing darkness, the silence now comfortable rather than oppressive. The church's old clock ticked steadily, marking time like a heartbeat. After a while, Evie wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. "I should get home," she said softly. "Maya will worry. And that precious grandson of yours needs his Nana," Pastor Lila added with a knowing smile. The drive home felt longer than usual, but Evie's heart had settled into a calmer rhythm. When she walked through her front door, the smell of Maya's cooking filled the small house. Chicken and dumplings. Comfort food from childhood. "Nana!" Jonah's voice rang out as he ran to meet her. His small arms wrapped around her waist with fierce love, and Evie felt tears threatening again, but different tears this time. "I saw you on TV," he said, looking up at her with serious brown eyes. They weren't being nice. "No, honey, they weren't," Evie agreed, smoothing his dark hair. "But you're still the bravest Nana ever," he declared. Then he pulled away and ran to his room, returning with one of his precious sticky notes. The paper was bright yellow, and his childish handwriting filled it with wobbly determination. "Don't quit, Nana." Evie took the note with trembling fingers, reading the simple words through tears. Such faith in those two words. The pure, unwavering belief of a child who saw past headlines to the grandmother he loved. Later that night, after Maya had gone to work her night shift and Jonah was tucked into bed, Evie stood in her bathroom. The mirror reflected her tired face, the worry lines around her eyes, the silver threading through her dark hair. But it also reflected strength, the kind of strength built through years of early mornings and late nights, of choosing hope over bitterness, of finding dignity in honest work. She took Jonah's sticky note and carefully pressed it to the corner of the mirror. The yellow paper glowed like a tiny sun against the plain white wall. "Don't quit, Nana." Touching the note gently, Evie felt something shift inside her. Not a solution to her problems, but a renewal of faith. Whatever came next, she would face it standing tall. God had opened this door for a reason, and even if she had to wait in the hallway for a while, she would wait with grace. She whispered a final prayer before turning out the light. Thank you for sticky notes and 7-year-old wisdom. Thank you for hallways that teach us patience. And thank you, Lord, for doors both open and closed. The fluorescent lights hummed in the basement break room of Heritage Tower as Carmen Alvarez stood before the night shift crew. Her dark eyes blazed with determination, and her cleaning cart stood forgotten in the corner. 20 faces looked back at her, janitors, maintenance workers, and cleaning staff who had worked alongside Evie for years. They think they can throw away one of our own? Carmen's voice carried steel beneath its warmth. Evie Martin worked these floors with us for 8 years. Never complained, always helped others, stayed late when someone's kid was sick. She pulled out a stack of blank papers. Well, we're going to tell them exactly who she is. Maria, who cleaned the executive floor, raised her hand. But what can we do? We're just the cleaning crew. Carmen smiled. We're witnesses. Every one of us has seen Evie's character up close. Remember when she taught Jose's daughter French for free? Or when she organized that food drive after Hurricane Marcus? She began passing out papers. We're going to write it all down. Official statements about who Evie really is. The room stirred with energy as people began sharing stories. Jorge remembered how Evie had helped him study for his citizenship test during lunch breaks. Sarah talked about the time Evie had stayed 4 hours late to help clean up a massive coffee spill before an important client meeting. Write it all down, Carmen instructed, her voice thick with emotion. Every kindness, every extra mile. Make it real. Make it true. Across town at St. Mark's Church, Pastor Lila had gathered her choir for an unusual morning session. The elderly minister's eyes twinkled as she adjusted her reading glasses and addressed the group. Family, she announced. We're going to sing a different kind of song today. She held up her smartphone. We're making a video about our sister Evie, about the light she brings to this world. Mrs. Washington, who had known Evie for 20 years, spoke first. She visited me every day when I had my hip surgery, brought soup, read scripture, never missed a day. She tutored my grandson in math, Mr. Thompson added. Wouldn't take a dime for it. One by one, choir members shared their stories. Veterans spoke of how Evie had helped organize care packages for troops. Nurses from Maya's hospital testified about Evie's volunteer work in the children's ward. Pastor Lila recorded it all, her trained eye catching the genuine emotion in each face. Meanwhile, at Evie's kitchen table, 7-year-old Jonah sat with his tongue stuck out in concentration, carefully printing letters on his special dinosaur stationery. Maya watched her son with tears in her eyes as he worked on his letter to the board. Dear important people, Jonah wrote in wobbly letters, my Nana is the nicest person in the whole world. She helps everybody, even when she's tired. She makes soup for sick people and teaches French to kids who can't pay. Please don't be mean to her. She says being kind is more important than being rich. Love, Jonah, age 7. He decorated the margins with careful drawings of hearts and stars, then added a post-it note from his special collection. For telling the truth about Nana. Carmen worked through her lunch break, collecting and organizing the statements. 23 testimonials, each one detailed and heartfelt. She took them to a notary, making everything official. Then she scanned them all, creating digital copies that couldn't be ignored. Pastor Lila spent hours editing the video, her arthritis-curved fingers carefully piecing together the testimonies. She added gentle background music, the choir's rendition of Amazing Grace, and ended with Jonah's letter, shone in his childish handwriting while he read it in his clear, young voice. By late afternoon, Carmen had created a private social media group called Stand with Evie. She posted the video and the testimonials with a simple message: "This is who Evie Martin really is. Share if you believe in kindness." The response was immediate. Heritage Tower's maintenance staff shared it first. Then the hospital staff from Maya's workplace. The choir members sent it to their families. Jonah's teacher shared it with other parents. Local community groups picked it up, touched by the simple authenticity of the testimonials. Unlike the angry headlines about bankruptcy and corporate scandal, this story spread differently. People shared it with comments like, "This is what leadership should look like," and "Why can't all businesses value people like this?" The video climbed steadily, not with outrage, but with hope. That evening, Evie sat at her kitchen table, staring at her daughter's laptop in disbelief. Maya held her mother's hand as they watched the view counter tick upward. Jonah bounced excitedly in his chair. "Look, Nana, people love you just like I do." Evie's vision blurred as she watched her community speak on her behalf. Mrs. Washington's dignified testimony about the soup deliveries, Jorge proudly holding up his citizenship papers, the veteran who removed his cap to speak about her kindness, and Jonah's letter, his young voice carrying a child's pure wisdom about what really mattered. "I don't know what to say," Evie whispered, squeezing Maya's hand. The video had already reached 50,000 views and was climbing. Comments poured in from around the city, then the state, then beyond. People she'd helped years ago were finding it and adding their own stories. Carmen's phone buzzed on the table. She'd come over to show Evie the sworn statements. The message was from a local news station requesting an interview. "They want to talk to us tomorrow," Carmen said, her voice proud. The real story, they said, about the night shift supervisor who became VP and the community that stood behind her. Evie watched as another 1,000 views ticked up on the counter, but it wasn't the numbers that moved her. It was the faces of her friends, her church family, her co-workers, all speaking truth with such simple conviction. Their words carried no corporate jargon, no strategic messaging, just authentic stories of everyday kindness, witnessed and remembered. Jonah climbed into her lap, pointing at his letter on the screen. "See, Nana? I told them you help everyone." He pulled out another sticky note and pressed it to her cheek. "For being the best Nana ever." The video continued to play, filling her kitchen with familiar voices and memories of small kindnesses she'd nearly forgotten. Each testimony was a thread in a larger tapestry, showing a picture of leadership that had nothing to do with corner offices or corporate titles. It was about seeing people, helping where you could, and believing in dignity, no matter what shoes you wore to work. The mahogany boardroom table gleamed under the morning light, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. 24 executives sat rigid in their leather chairs, papers rustling as Graham Whitfield rose from his seat at the head of the table. His silver hair caught the sunlight, but his usually warm face was etched with gravity. Harold Delaney sat near the center, his jaw set like granite. Chase slouched beside him, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The air felt thick with tension as Graham buttoned his suit jacket, a gesture that seemed more like donning armor than following protocol. "Before we vote on Evelyn Martin's future with this company," Graham began, his voice steady but gentler than usual, "I need to tell you about another woman. My mother, Rose Whitfield." A murmur rippled through the room. In 15 years as CEO, Graham had never spoken of his family background. He pulled an old photograph from his breast pocket and held it up. The image showed a petite woman in a worn dress, sitting at an industrial sewing machine. This was taken in 1962 at the Marcus Brothers Garment Factory in South St. Louis. Graham's fingers trembled slightly as he set the photo on the table. "My mother worked there during the day, but that wasn't enough to keep food on our table. So every night, she cleaned offices in buildings just like this one." The room grew still. Even the usual tap of phones had ceased. "She taught me English between her shifts, sitting at our kitchen table with a flashlight, because we couldn't afford to keep the lights on too long." Graham's voice grew thick with emotion. "She showed me that dignity isn't found in a title or a corner office. It's in how you treat others, especially when no one important is watching." He walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "Many of you have questioned my judgment in promoting Evelyn Martin. You've called it rushed, reckless, even politically motivated. He paused near Harold Delaney. And you're right about one thing. I broke protocol. Harold's face darkened, but Graham continued. I promoted her because in that moment, watching her bridge worlds with grace and skill, I saw what my mother taught me, that talent and character aren't confined to Ivy League degrees or corporate pedigrees. Graham returned to his place at the head of the table. I saw a woman who spent 8 years cleaning our offices with dignity, who taught French at community college until life knocked her down, who raised her children alone after tragedy, and still had the strength to help others. He spread his hands on the polished wood. If you want to judge someone for breaking protocol, judge me. If you want to question someone's judgment, question mine. But before you vote, ask yourself this. What kind of company do we want to be? One that values only traditional paths to power? Or one brave enough to recognize excellence wherever it appears? The silence that followed felt electric. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing between Graham and Harold. Iris, the HR director, was scribbling furiously in her notebook, her expression unreadable. My mother cleaned offices until the day she died, Graham said softly. She never got her chance to show what else she could do. But she taught me that leadership isn't about where you came from. It's about where you're willing to go for others. He squared his shoulders. I stand by my decision to promote Evelyn Martin. And if the board decides that decision warrants my removal as CEO, I'll accept that consequence. But I will not apologize for recognizing in her what my mother taught me to see, the dignity of work, the courage to rise, and the heart to lift others as you climb. Harold Delaney's face had turned an alarming shade of red. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles showed white. But around the table, other faces had softened. Barbara Chen, head of operations, was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Even Marcus Reynolds, usually Harold's strongest ally, looked thoughtful. Graham sat down, straightening his tie. The vote is yours, he said quietly. But whatever you decide, remember this. Sometimes the most qualified person for a job isn't the one with the most impressive resume. Sometimes they're the one with the strongest character, quietly serving while others take credit. Just like my mother did. Just like Evelyn Martin has done. The room remained silent. Harold Delaney's fury seemed to radiate from him like heat, but he said nothing. His fingers drummed against the table in a sharp staccato, but the sound only emphasized the profound quiet that had fallen over the boardroom. The other board members exchanged glances, some thoughtful, some moved, some uncertain. But none of them looked at Harold now. Instead, their eyes kept returning to the old photograph still lying on the table. A seamstress at her machine, her dignity intact, her legacy living on in ways she could never have imagined. The silence in the boardroom shattered as a chair scraped against the floor. Chase Delaney stood up abruptly, his face pale but determined. His expensive suit couldn't hide how his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie. Mr. Chairman, I need to speak. His voice cracked on the first words but grew stronger. Graham paused mid-sentence, turning to face the younger man with surprise. Harold Delaney's head snapped toward his son, eyes narrowing. Chase, sit down, he commanded in a harsh whisper that carried across the quiet room. But Chase straightened his shoulders, looking past his father to where Evie sat quietly at the far end of the table, her hands folded in her lap. No, Dad. I need to do this. The morning sun, streaming through the windows, cast long shadows across the carpet as Chase stepped away from his chair. His footsteps seemed unnaturally loud in the hushed room. That first morning, when Mrs. Martin was still cleaning this very room, I mocked her. The words tumbled out, gaining momentum. I called her the help. I made cruel jokes about people who mop floors instead of making deals. I treated her like she was beneath me. Murmurs rippled around the table. Harold's face darkened to a dangerous shade of red, but Chase pressed on. And when she showed more grace and intelligence in 5 minutes of French than I've shown in my entire career here. He swallowed hard. I couldn't handle it. My pride was hurt, so I dug into her past. I found the bankruptcy filing from her son's medical bills. I leaked it to the press. Gasps echoed through the room. Iris, the HR director, closed her eyes in pain. Graham's expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened where they gripped the back of his chair. I did it because I was scared, Chase admitted, his voice growing hoarse. Not of Mrs. Martin failing, of her succeeding. Because if someone who cleaned offices at night could become a better leader than me, what did that say about all my fancy degrees? About everything I thought made me special? He turned to face Evie directly now. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but she met his gaze steadily. Mrs. Martin, Evie, you gave me back my cufflink that night. You told me you believed I could be better than my worst moment. Chase's voice cracked again. I didn't deserve that kindness, but it haunted me. Your Bridge Teams program showed me what real leadership looks like. It's not about titles or corner offices. It's about seeing the worth in every person, even when they can't see it in themselves. Harold slammed his palm on the table. That's enough. You're embarrassing yourself in this family. No, Dad. Chase's voice grew stronger. For once, I'm doing something I won't be ashamed of later. Mrs. Martin is the kind of leader I want to learn from. The kind this company needs. And I'm sorry. So deeply sorry. For trying to tear her down instead of learning from her example. Evie rose slowly from her chair, her movements graceful despite her obvious emotion. Chase, she said softly, her voice carrying in the stillness. I forgive you. She crossed the room, her sensible shoes quiet on the carpet, and stood before him. Your words hurt me deeply, she continued, gentle but firm. But I meant what I said about believing in you. Thank you for telling the truth today. Chase's carefully maintained composure cracked. A tear slid down his cheek as Evie reached out and squeezed his hand briefly. The boardroom fell completely silent. Harold Delaney's rage seemed to deflate as he stared at his son and the woman he'd tried to dismiss. Graham watched the scene unfold, his eyes suspiciously bright. Around the table, faces showed varying degrees of shock, shame, and dawning respect. In that profound quiet, something shifted. The morning sun caught the crystal water pitcher on the table, sending rainbow prisms dancing across the walls, light breaking through in unexpected places, just like truth. The boardroom's tension was cut by a gentle chime from the video screen. Renée Dubois' elegant figure appeared, perfectly composed despite the early hour in Paris. Her silk scarf caught the morning light from her office window, and her expression was both serious and warm. Bonjour, everyone, she began, her accent crisp and clear. I hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial. Harold Delaney shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Ms. Dubois, we're in the middle of a rather sensitive board matter. Precisely why I asked to join, Renée interjected smoothly. Her dark eyes found Evie across the video feed. Madam Martin, I've been following the developments with great interest. Evie sat straighter, her simple navy dress a stark contrast to the executive suits surrounding her. Her hands remained steady in her lap, though her heart raced beneath her grandmother's old brooch. I want to speak about integrity, Renée continued, her gaze sweeping the room. In my 30 years of business, I have learned that it reveals itself not in grand gestures, but in small moments of truth. She paused, letting her words settle. When I first met Madame Martin, she could have pretended not to understand French. She could have stayed silent, protected herself. Instead, she chose to help. Not for recognition, but because it was right. The board members exchanged glances. Chase's confession still hung in the air, making Renée's words even more powerful. And now, Renée said, reaching for something off-screen, I would like to announce 2 things. She held up a thick document. First, I am prepared to sign the full contract we've been discussing. Not just the pilot program, the entire 3-year commitment. Gasps rippled through the room. Harold Delaney's eyebrows shot up. The contract was worth millions. Graham leaned forward, his expression careful but hopeful. Second, Renée continued, Dubois International would like to establish a joint scholarship program with your company. We will match your funding dollar for dollar to help service workers pursue their education while maintaining their employment. Evie's hand flew to her mouth. Tears pricked at her eyes as she thought of all the night shift workers who, like her, had dreams beyond their current circumstances. We'll call it the Bridge Scholars Program, Renée smiled, nodding at Evie, because sometimes the most important bridges we build are between where people are and where they could be. Iris, who had been taking rapid notes, looked up. The funding implications are significant, but the potential ROI in terms of employee development and retention. Her usual stern expression softened. It's brilliant. Graham stood, commanding the room's attention. I move that we vote on 2 items. First, The reinstatement of Evelyn Martin as Vice President of Community, Global Partnerships, this time with full board review and approval. Second, the establishment of the Bridge Scholars Program in partnership with Dubois International. Harold Delaney cleared his throat. The room tensed, waiting. He paused, glancing at his son Chase, who met his gaze steadily. I second the motion. All in favor? Graham asked. Hands rose around the table, one by one. Chase's shot up immediately. Harold's followed more slowly but deliberately. Iris raised hers with a small but genuine smile, the first Evie had seen from her. The vote is unanimous, Graham announced, his voice warm with triumph. He turned to Evie. Ms. Martin, would you please join me at the head of the table? Evie rose, her legs steady despite her racing heart. As she walked the length of the boardroom, she remembered her first night cleaning it, how she'd hummed hymns in the darkness while polishing the very same table. Graham extended his hand, his eyes bright with pride and vindication. Welcome home, Vice President Martin. Their handshake was firm, a seal on everything that had happened. Through the screen, Renee beamed her approval, while around the table, board members began to applaud. Chase joined in first, then his father, until the sound filled the room. Iris approached with a fresh badge and a stack of papers. We'll need to process the official paperwork right away, she said, but her usual efficiency was tempered with warmth. And I believe your office is waiting for you. Through the boardroom's glass walls, Evie could see her night shift colleagues gathered in the hallway. Carmen at the front, all of them grinning and giving thumbs up. Maya stood among them, her nurse's scrubs still on from her night shift, her eyes shining with tears of joy. And there, held up high on Carmen's shoulders, was Jonah, pressing a sticky note against the glass. Even from a distance, Evie could read his careful child's handwriting. God answers prayers. The glass doors of headquarters parted with a soft whoosh as Evie Martin stepped into the lobby. She wore a simple navy blazer over a cream blouse, clothes Maya had helped her pick out. Her sensible shoes, though polished, were still her trusty work ones. Some habits died hard, and comfort meant more than style. The first person she saw was Carmen, standing with a group of cleaning staff near the security desk. Then she noticed executives lingering by the elevators, trying to look casual. As she took another step inside, Carmen started clapping. The sound echoed off the marble floors, joined quickly by more hands. Janitors, security guards, office workers, and yes, even the suit-wearing executives. Evie's cheeks flushed. Oh, please, she said softly, but her eyes grew misty as Carmen rushed forward to hug her. Welcome back, VP Martin, Carmen whispered in her ear. We kept your office dust-free. More people surrounded her. Tom from maintenance, slapping her shoulder. Sarah from accounting with tears in her eyes. Even Iris offering a formal but genuine handshake. The paperwork's all properly filed this time, Iris said with a small smile. The elevator ride up felt different today. Instead of pressing herself into the corner with her cleaning cart, Evie stood tall among colleagues, who now met her eyes with respect. When the doors opened on her floor, she found her borrowed conference room transformed. Someone had added a proper desk, comfortable chairs, and, she touched it gently, a sleek nameplate reading, Evelyn Martin, VP of Community, Global Partnerships. She set her purse down and reached into it, pulling out the old ring of maintenance keys she'd carried for years. The metal was worn smooth in places from countless nights of use. Each key had a story. The one for the supply closet that always stuck, the backup for the executive washroom, the master key she'd used to let in early morning workers who'd forgotten their badges. With deliberate care, she placed the key ring on the corner of her desk, not hidden away in a drawer, but visible, a reminder of where she'd come from and what she'd learned along the way. A knock at her door made her look up. Chase Delaney stood there, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. Gone was the arrogant smirk, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Miss Martin, he said, then corrected himself. Evie, do you have a minute? She gestured to a chair. Of course, Chase. He sat but seemed to struggle with his words. I've been thinking, he finally said, a lot, about how I treated you, about what I did. He paused, about who I want to be. Evie waited patiently, remembering the cufflink she'd returned to him what felt like ages ago. The Bridge Teams program, he continued. It's changing things here, real things, and I was wondering, He straightened his shoulders. I'd like to help. Actually, I'd like to co-lead the bias and forgiveness workshops with you, if you'll have me. Evie studied him for a long moment. It won't be easy, she said gently. You'll have to be vulnerable. Share your own story. Listen to hard truths. I know, he nodded. I think that's exactly what I need. A knock interrupted them. Graham stood in the doorway, beaming. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got good news. The board just voted to make bridge teams permanent. Full funding, dedicated staff, the works. Evie's hand flew to her heart. Oh, thank the Lord, she whispered. And, Graham continued, Renee called. The scholarship program launches next month. She wants you in Paris for the announcement. Chase stood up. I should go, but please, think about what I said? Evie nodded. I already have, Chase. Yes, we'll start planning next week. After they left, Evie sat quietly at her desk, taking it all in. Her eyes fell on the sticky note Jonah had given her weeks ago, still stuck to her computer monitor. Be brave, Nana. She smiled, touching the paper gently. From the window, she could see the city spread out below, the morning sun glinting off other buildings. The same view she used to see while cleaning windows at dawn, now seen from the other side of the glass. She'd stepped through the door God opened, weathered the storm in the hallway, and found herself exactly where she needed to be. A smile touched her lips as she smoothed her blazer and opened her laptop. There was work to be done. Morning sunlight streamed through the soaring glass walls of the corporate headquarters lobby, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Television cameras lined the back wall while reporters filled the rows of chairs, their notepads ready. The usual quiet buzz of the lobby had transformed into an expectant hum. Graham Whitfield stood at the podium, his silver hair catching the light. Behind him, a banner stretched across the wall, announcing the Seamstress Broom Scholarship Fund. Evie sat in the front row between Carmen and Maya, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Jonah perched beside Maya, swinging his feet and clutching a fresh sticky note. Good morning, Graham began, his voice warm and steady. Today marks a new chapter in our company's history. But first, I'd like to share a story about my mother. The room fell silent as Graham described evening scenes from his childhood, his mother returning home late from cleaning offices, her hands raw from scrubbing but her spirit unbroken. How she'd taught him about dignity and honest work by flashlight at their kitchen table. That's why, Graham continued, glancing at Evie with a smile, when I witnessed similar strength and wisdom in our own Evelyn Martin, I knew we had found something rare. Someone who could bridge worlds and remind us what leadership truly means. He gestured for Evie to join him at the podium. She rose smoothly, though her heart fluttered. Her navy blazer felt strange after years in her cleaning uniform, but Carmen had assured her she looked perfect. The Seamstress Broom Scholarship, Evie announced, her voice clear and strong, will provide full tuition and support for service workers pursuing higher education while maintaining their jobs. She paused, emotion tightening her throat. Because sometimes life takes unexpected turns, but that doesn't mean dreams die. They just need a little help to grow again. In the audience, Carmen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Several other members of the cleaning crew weren't even trying to hide their tears. Chase Delaney, sitting quietly in the back row, nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. The initial fund, Graham added, will support 10 students annually, with priority given to single parents and those supporting families. He turned to Evie. Would you like to share the other news? Evie stepped forward again. Yes. Thanks to our partnership with René Dubois and our French colleagues, the program will include international exchange opportunities. Because wisdom knows no borders and dignity speaks every language, reporters' hands shot up and questions flew. Ms. Martin, how does it feel to go from janitor to VP? Will you still clean offices? What message do you have for other working-class dreamers? Evie answered each question with grace, but it was her response to the last one that made Maya beam with pride. I'm not just a janitor who became a VP, Evie said firmly. I'm a French teacher who became a janitor, who became a VP. Life isn't linear. Sometimes the path down teaches you exactly what you need to know for the climb back up. Carmen stood up suddenly, her voice ringing out. And she never stopped being our friend. That's the real story here. Other custodial staff members nodded vigorously. Someone started clapping, and the applause spread through the room like a wave. As the formal press conference wound down, Jonah tugged at Evie's sleeve.
"Nana, look outside!"
Through the glass doors, a crowd had gathered on the plaza. Church members stood shoulder to shoulder with cleaning staff from other buildings. Several of Evie's regular bus drivers had parked their buses and joined the group. Maya's nursing colleagues waved on their way to shift change. Pastor Lila stood front and center, her choir assembled behind her. Evie stepped outside to thunderous applause. The choir broke into Amazing Grace, their voices soaring above the city noise. Handmade signs bobbed in the crowd. "We love you, Miss Evie," and "Dignity Works," and "From Mop to Mountaintop." An elderly veteran Evie had often chatted with during her cleaning rounds pushed forward to press a small American flag into her hands. "You did us proud, ma'am," he said gruffly. Carmen appeared at her side, linking their arms together. "Look what you started, friend," she whispered. Evie's eyes filled with tears as she gazed at the gathered faces, every one of them part of her journey, every smile a reminder that no one succeeds alone. The morning sun warmed her face as she lifted her hand to wave, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. A reporter called out one final question. "Miss Martin, what's your secret to staying humble while achieving such success?" Evie's answer came straight from her heart. "When you've mopped 1,000 floors and scrubbed 1,000 toilets, you learn that every job has dignity. And when you've been lifted up by 1,000 acts of kindness, you learn that every person has value. That's not humility. That's just truth." The crowd erupted in cheers again. Jonah bounced up and down, waving his sticky note high in the air. Maya slipped her arm around her mother's waist, and Carmen squeezed Evie's hand. Behind them, Graham watched with quiet satisfaction as his mother's lessons about dignity and worth bloomed into something bigger than anyone had imagined. The city traffic rolled past. The skyscraper gleamed in the morning light, and Evie Martin stood surrounded by her community, her heart swelling with gratitude for both the valleys and the peaks that had led her to this moment. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of Hope Community Church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old hymnals filled the air as the congregation settled in for Sunday service. Evie sat in her usual spot, third row from the front, her heart full and peaceful. The choir members, dressed in their royal blue robes, swayed gently as they lifted their voices in perfect harmony. Mrs. Henderson's soprano soared above the rest, crystal clear and pure, while Mr. Prano, Thompson's rich bass, provided a sturdy foundation. They sang, "Great is Thy Faithfulness," one of Evie's favorites, and she found herself unconsciously mouthing the words. 7-year-old Jonah fidgeted beside her in his Sunday best, his clip-on tie slightly crooked. He clutched his ever-present pad of sticky notes, ready to award kindness points at a moment's notice. Maya sat on his other side, her nurse's scrubs replaced by a simple floral dress, her eyes already glistening with emotion. "Let us praise God for His endless mercies." Pastor Lila's warm voice carried across the sanctuary as the song ended. She stood at the pulpit, her silver hair catching the morning light. "Today, I want to share a testimony of faith that has touched us all." Evie's cheeks warmed as Pastor Lila's kind eyes found her in the congregation. She hadn't expected this attention. "Our dear sister Evelyn Martin has shown us what it means to walk with grace through life's valleys and mountaintops," Pastor Lila continued, her voice gentle but strong. "From cleaning floors to corporate floors, she never lost her servant's heart." Jonah bounced in his seat, beaming with pride. He quickly scribbled on a sticky note and held it up for his grandmother to see, "Best Nana Ever," with a row of gold stars drawn along the bottom. "Through trials and triumph," Pastor Lila went on, "Evie showed us that true leadership isn't about power. It's about serving others. She united people who never thought they'd work together. She forgave those who tried to harm her. She kept her faith when others might have lost hope." The congregation murmured in agreement. Carmen, sitting a few rows back, wiped her eyes with a tissue. Even Chase Delaney, who had started attending services recently, nodded solemnly from his place near the back. "But most importantly," Pastor Lila smiled, "she reminded us that God doesn't see titles or positions. He sees hearts willing to be used for His purpose." The choir began to hum softly, a gentle underscore to Pastor Lila's words. Evie felt Maya's hand slip into hers, squeezing tightly. "Mom," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All those nights you worked, all those prayers you prayed, you never stopped believing." She turned to face her mother fully, tears now flowing freely. "You showed me what faith looks like, not just in words, but in how you lived every single day." Jonah wedged himself between them, wrapping his small arms around both women. "Group hug," he announced, making several nearby congregants chuckle softly. Pastor Lila gestured to the choir, and they began singing Amazing Grace. The familiar melody washed over the sanctuary, voices rising and falling like waves of blessing. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward for her solo, her voice carrying the words that seemed written for this very moment. "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come." Evie closed her eyes, feeling the music vibrate through her very being. The past months played through her mind like a film reel. The late nights with her mop and bucket, the shocking promotion, the painful accusations, and the beautiful redemption. Through it all, God had been faithful. The choir's voices swelled, filling every corner of the sanctuary with glorious sound. Jonah hummed along, off-key but enthusiastic, while Maya wiped fresh tears from her cheeks. Carmen's voice carried from behind them, strong and sure in the Spanish verses she'd grown up singing. As the music reached its crescendo, Evie felt overwhelmed by gratitude for her family's unwavering support, for Pastor Lila's steady guidance, for the community that had rallied around her, for second chances and open doors, for hallways that led to unexpected blessings. The sunbeams through the stained glass seemed to dance with the music, painting everything in holy light. Evie's eyes remained closed, her heart too full for words. She could only whisper, barely audible above the magnificent choir, "All glory to you." The sound of voices lifted higher and higher, a beautiful offering of praise that seemed to touch heaven itself. In that moment, surrounded by love and bathed in song, Evie Martin, night cleaner turned VP, mother, grandmother, and faithful servant, knew deep in her soul that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The choir continued their joyful worship, their songs echoing off the old church walls, carrying messages of hope, redemption, and amazing grace. This was home. This was family. This was faith made real. The evening sky painted streaks of purple and orange across the windows of Lou's downtown diner, where the familiar scent of coffee and fresh-baked pie wrapped around the corner booth like a warm blanket. Evie sat beside Jonah, with Maya and Carmen across from them, their empty plates scattered with crumbs from Marie's famous apple pie. Through the slightly smudged glass, Evie could see the city's skyline, where her office building stood proud among its steel and glass neighbors. "Remember when you used to clean those windows?" Carmen asked, following Evie's gaze while stirring her coffee. Her supervisor's badge caught the diner's fluorescent light, a reminder of their shared journey. "Every Tuesday and Friday," Evie replied with a soft laugh. "My arms would get so tired, but the sunrise made it worth it." Jonah wiggled in his seat, clutching his prized collection of Gold Star stickers. His small fingers carefully peeled one from its backing, his face scrunched in concentration. "Nana, your kindness jar needs one more star." Maya reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "He's been saving this one, Mom. Says it had to be perfect." The glass jar sat in the center of the table, its surface already decorated with dozens of golden stars, each representing a moment of kindness Jonah had witnessed from his grandmother. Some were slightly crooked, others overlapping, but everyone held a story. "For not quitting," Jonah announced proudly, pressing the star onto the jar with deliberate care. "Even when the mean people tried to make you sad." Evie's eyes misted as she pulled her grandson close. "Oh, sweetheart, those stars helped me more than you know." Carmen shook her head, smiling. "Girl, who would have thought? From pushing that mop cart to running board meetings, you showed them all what real leadership looks like." "You know what I learned?" Evie said, straightening the sugar packets absently. "Whether you're cleaning floors or leading meetings, it's all about serving others, about doing everything with love." The waitress, Betty, stopped by their table with a fresh pot of coffee. "On the house," she insisted, topping off their cups. "We're all so proud of you, Evie. My daughter cut out that newspaper article about the scholarship program. Got it hanging on our fridge. The Seamstress Broom Scholarship," Maya said proudly. "Mom, you're going to help so many people go back to school." Evie reached into her purse and pulled out her key ring. The metal was worn smooth in places from years of use. She placed it gently on the tabletop, running her finger over each key. This one was for the supply closet on the 3rd floor, she said, touching a small brass key. And this one, the executive washrooms I used to clean. Now I have my own office right next to them. But you still keep the keys, Carmen observed. To remember where I came from, Evie nodded. Every door these keys opened, every hallway they led me down, they were all part of the path. Jonah studied the keys with fascination. Like a treasure map, Nana? Exactly like that, sweet boy. Each key was leading me somewhere special, even when I didn't know it. The diner's jukebox switched songs, and the soft strains of an old hymn filled the air. Evie closed her eyes for a moment, remembering all those nights of humming while she worked, finding comfort in the melodies. Doors and hallways, she whispered, opening her eyes to find her family watching her with love. Everyone led me here. Maya leaned forward. You know what Pastor Lila said last Sunday? She said, sometimes God plants our biggest blessings in our hardest moments. Like how losing your teaching job led you to cleaning, which led you to that morning with Renee, which led to everything else. And now look at you, Carmen added, gesturing to Evie's smart business suit. Vice President Martin, still speaking French, still cleaning up messes, just different kinds now. Speaking of messes, Evie smiled. You should see Chase in our bias training sessions. That young man is really trying to change. Sometimes the hardest cleaning is what we do in here. She tapped her heart. Jonah picked up the kindness jar, careful not to disturb any of his stars. The diner's lights caught the glass, making the golden stars shimmer. Can we put it in your new office, Nana? So everyone can see? Right on my desk, Evie promised. Next to my old keys. Because sometimes the best way forward is remembering where you've been. Betty returned with a slice of pie topped with extra whipped cream. For our favorite VP, she winked. Though I miss seeing you here for your midnight breaks. Oh, I'll still be coming in, Evie assured her. Some things are too precious to change. The group fell into comfortable silence, sharing the extra pie between them. Through the window, the city lights began twinkling on, one by one, like stars coming out. Evie watched them, remembering all the nights she'd spent cleaning those buildings, never imagining she'd end up where she was now. Carmen raised her coffee cup. To doors and hallways, to doors and hallways, they echoed, and Jonah added extra loud, and to Nana. Evie placed her hand over her key ring, feeling the familiar shapes beneath her palm. Each key had unlocked something more than just a door. They had unlocked possibilities, relationships, and finally, her true calling. The metal was warm from her touch, like old friends holding hands. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Evelyn Evie Martin, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it,